Hi guys, Dan from onlinebasscourses.com. I've also got a site called onlinebassplayer.com. I went very literal with my website names. And that one is a remote online recording service that I've had for over 10 years now. And I've done everything from jingles, TV, film to, singer, songwriter, amateur kind of projects. And yeah, well over 1,000 tracks. And it kind of struck me that the bass I've used on probably 80% of those sessions has been my 1978 Fender Precision bass. And I'll probably do a video on that at some point, but the thing about that bass is it just has a recorded sound that sits in the mix well, and people have heard a P bass for so many decades now that it just fits and it's right. So, if anyone's really wanting to get into recording, I highly recommend getting a Fender four-string Fender Precision, preferably vintage if you can, but some of the newer and second-hand Fender models are brilliant and you just can't go wrong. It's also a perception thing. People love a Fender, even though there are just absolutely tons of other amazing makers out there now. I'd go Fender Precision, you can't go wrong. But the other classic bass, of course, is your Fender Jazz, and that's what I wanted to talk about a bit on this video. I've been getting a bit more into it recently, and I started on a bass with similar kind of pickup configurations. That P bass kind of does one sound really, but it does it really well. So yeah, just by altering the very simple knobs you've got here and maybe some different things you can do with your hands, this bass is far more versatile. So if you were after maybe just one bass to get, then a Fender Jazz, or at least something with two pickups, is a classic option. These are the original pickups on this bass, and I've got it strung with Bass Center Elite strings. I can't remember if these are the nickel or the stainless steel ones, and they're not super brand new, so they don't sound very zingy. I actually quite like the sound of slightly deadened strings, but if you do a recording, sometimes it's good to change them. So yeah, we'll just go through a few classic kind of tones that you can make from it. So to start with, the kind of really simple one would be both pickups fully on and the tone knob. Yeah, let me just explain if you don't know. This front knob is the front pickup, the neck pickup, and this second one is the bridge pickup, and that is just the tone knob. So very simple. P bass, you've just got a volume knob and a tone knob, so even simpler. So fully up, you've got a bit of fingerstyle. It's just quite a nice deep full sound, and it's pretty good for slap as well. Now here's where it gets really cool, because if you can blend this, but if I just completely turn off the front pickup, so I've only got the back pickup, you got that kind of famous, a kind of Jacko sound, a lot more mid-range kind of bark to it. Now I'm playing on my own here, and in music you play with other instruments, of course, so you're not really getting the full sound of that with blending with anything else, but you can hear the difference in sound between the back pickup and both pickups at the same time. And very good for funk, and obviously Jacko played a lot of jazz and fusion, but it's really up to you how you use any of these. Just because this is used a lot in jazz, it doesn't mean you can't use, find your own thing here. So that would be at the back pickup, really good for harmonics and those popping out a lot more. If I played, what if I did both pickups fully on? Just a deeper, fuller sound, pretty cool. But that's good for that. You can blend in a bit of the front, that's about halfway. You just get a bit more punch though with that. So a really great bass player that you should check out if you don't know him is Joe Osborne, and he played like a 60s Fender Jazz. He had flat wounds on it, and he did hundreds, probably thousands of recordings with that. And one trick that he would do to get his bass to sound a bit more like a P bass would be to have the front pickup fully on, the back pickup fully off, and this time bring down some of the tone knob. In fact, I'll bring it down completely. I don't know if he played on Son of a Preacher Man, I think he did, but the intro, something like that. But that, I mean, it doesn't sound exactly like a P bass, but it certainly is kind of getting more into that direction. So that's a really, really cool thing you can do. And again, as I mentioned, with flat wounds on, that sounds really, really great. Bringing that tone knob back, but keeping just the bridge pickup on its own, you get a really nice round warm tone. And again, if you just move your plucking hand a bit more over the end of the fretboard there, you can change the tone. I mean, if I just keep the dials exactly where they are there, you can really change the sound just by where your hand is, okay? Even though this pickup's not on at all, it sounds a bit more mid-rangey. But not as much as if I turned that pickup on there. Also sounds great with a plectrum, and maybe a tone I'd probably use with this is just, again, pickups fully on, tone fully on. And kind of playing a bit more over this front pickup. But let's try something else. What if I went a bit more to this back pickup? In fact, yeah, what does it sound like with just the back pickup and a plectrum? The tone kind of thins out a little bit the more you come closer to the bridge with the plectrum. You get this kind of tighter kind of sound, but it's also feels different when you're using the plectrum closer to the bridge. I kind of tend to want to play a bit more rocky here and a bit more funky back here. But again, personal preference, you can do whatever you like, really. So yeah, just a few little tones you can do with a jazz bass, but if I were playing my P bass, I could alter the tones by using a plectrum, obviously using some slap, and applying different attacks. You know, you can play really, really hard, or you can play lighter, and you can alter where your hand position is across, you know, from the bridge to the where the fretboard ends here. But this is definitely a far more versatile bass than a P bass is. Now this is a passive bass, meaning it doesn't have any onboard preamp. And Marcus Miller was famous in New York in the 80s, I think, for getting Roger Sadowski to put in an onboard preamp, and that's Marcus Miller's sound. That just means that it's got powered by a battery, and it's got treble bass and usually mids on it as well, although I don't think he did have mids on his one. I don't know. But anyway, you can get onboard preamps for basses. Now, probably if you had a vintage one, you wouldn't want to do that to it, so you can get outboard preamps. In fact, I've got the Sadowski outboard preamp, which is brilliant, and it just means that you can kind of connect this to it, and you've suddenly got even more tones, because you can shape the tone a bit more just without having to root out the bass and do crazy things to that. So that's even more of a versatility that you could add to it. Now, this is a bass that I pretty much stole from my brother, actually, because he bought this, or got given this, I think in the 90s. I think it is from the 90s, this bass. And yeah, he didn't end up becoming a bass player, and I did, so I pretty much nicked it. Now, The thing about this bass that's really weird is that there's literally nothing original on this bass apart from the actual body itself. Everything else, I kind of Frankensteined it up, really. It's got a badass bridge, which just adds a bit more sustain. It's quite a common modification to a jazz bass. I probably wouldn't want to change my 75 too much. It just sounds good as it is, so I just want to leave it. But this one, I think it's got bare knuckle pickups in it. This is a Knoll preamp, German-made preamp, which is really good. Even the scratch plate is new because there's a new truss rod here. The neck, I had another neck built by Mike Walsh, who's a great bass luthier here in England. And I reverted back to a Fender neck because I wanted a Fender, and that wasn't a Fender neck, and I just kind of got back more into Fenders. Now, this is a maple neck. The original had a rosewood neck, actually, so this has got a brighter sound, this maple neck. And it's got that preamp, so the knobs are a bit different here on this preamp. And I'm a big fan of basses that don't have too much going on down there, to be honest. I play a Music Man Stingray a lot, and there's not much you can do with that, and I like that. It's just got a good sound. But for the studio and for live, it is great to be able to shape your tone sometimes. So I've got volume here and it's push-pull. What I like about this preamp is that if everything's flat and you go from active to passive, active is down, passive is up, it doesn't really change the tone much, if at all, really, which is great. There's no big jump in volume. So this knob here, if you go forward, you've got the very similar to the other bass, where you've just got that sort of deep, round, warm sound there. Going back to the bridge pickup, that sound, and in the middle on this particular preamp, you've got both pickups wide open. So this is where it gets interesting with this sort of a setup where you've got a Fender Jazz bass or similar and an onboard preamp, is that now I can maybe, let me add some treble and some bass. This would be passive, so I've just lifted up this knob here. If I just slap it. Now preamp in, and I've just boosted a little bit of treble, a little bit of bass. You can hear that snap. It brings out the highs more because I've added a bit of treble and a bit of bass to boost it a bit. And that's kind of the sound. Marcus Miller has something similar to that on his amazing signature jazz bass. He's got those Sire basses now as well, similar kind of sound. And you just have a lot more access to getting different tones if you do have a preamp on board, an active jazz bass. So that is another thing that you can do. So they're pretty simple basses, and I've got the passive old one and the sort of active new one. Even though it's from the 90s, it seems new to me, but it's not. So just as a bass to get, really, it doesn't have to be a Fender, although if you're really getting serious into recording or into playing in bands, you really can't go wrong with that, because there's a perception thing as well. People they love to see that, they love to see the Fender logo. It is a thing. That really is a thing. I've turned up on gigs with basses that aren't Fenders, and well, I mean, I play a 5-string Music Man, and even sometimes the 5th string freaks some people out. So it just works really well, and people know it. And I really would recommend checking them out if you don't already. But that was just a few different ways that you could get a variety of tones just on your own through hand position and just tweaking on an active or a passive bass. You can do loads of things. So if you've got any questions, just let me know, and I'll see you next time.